Welcome to Open Market, a podcast about building companies in the advertising industry. I am Joe Zappa, and I'm joined today by Arthur Larrey, si vous voulez en français, or Arthur Larry, if you want in the vulgar English that Eric speaks, from Audion. How you guys doing?
Guys, nice to meet you. Very good French introduction, Joe. Perfect accent, I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I spent many years of schooling harnessing that accent to absolutely zero commercial effect, but it is a fun party trick.
I got nothing.
We
Do
were
not
just
ask me for any of my French pronunciations. Won't go well.
we were just talking about. Oh, but I do like when I'm talking to Apple and it says Eric Franchi is calling. It's like you're receiving a call from Eric Franchi, and I'm like, un accento molto italiano. Che bene.
All right, stop showing off. Stop showing off.
I don't know. I don't really know Italian, so I might be making those words up. I'm just borrowing them from French. Arthur knows that because all the French people go down to Italy on vacation, and they're just like I once went to Italy with a French friend, and the barista was just like, she heard us talking, and then she just responded in French because they're so used to you guys.
Yeah, indeed. I believe we can fake it better, when we're in Italy. But we are faking a lot, to be honest, as well.
Right, right. We were just talking about Arthur moving to Brooklyn, and that reminds me of one of my favorite little cultural anecdotes from the pod, which is Dan Pantello from Barpipe came on, and he lives in Tribeca, and he's about my age. And I told him I live in Greenpoint, and he goes, "Oh, you have kids?" And I was like, "That's definitely a dig. That's definitely like, oh, he's like, you're no longer cool. You live in like the like people with young kids neighborhood," which is true. There are many strollers in Greenpoint, so you'll be right at home here, Arthur.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, as I said prior to the recording, Brooklyn is a good place when you have kids, but it also, coming from Paris, felt a little bit more like home because you don't have like all the big buildings you can have in the city where we'll have our offices. So I guess, I play both ways, which will be great.
Well, that's why in the olden days, all the Europeans, especially Parisians, they would move to the West Village, right? Like, I feel like that was the like hot spot for French people in New York. But now, like, the West Village is like overrun with TikTokers.
Arthur, man, so you're moving from the land of the croissants to the land of the bagel. What's that transition going to be like for you?
That's so I need to prepare myself. I know the food scene is great in New York, but
Yeah.
what I'm more concerned about right now is really the level of caffeine because I'm used to 2 espressos a day, whereas in the States it's like much more bigger cup. So I need to prep myself for more like the level of caffeine, much more than for the food. If you want my personal opinion on that.
Arthur, I need your reaction to this, and don't pull punches. I was at Cannes last year, and I sat down with someone in ad tech who's from the U.S. and they tried to order like, we were at like a little cafe on the corner. So for people who don't know, like, when you're in France, you're these little cafes. They're all the same, and like they don't have like the crazy American drinks, right? Like it's like what you order is like an espresso and like maybe two other things, like a cafe au lait, whatever. And so Arthur, we sit down. He's like, "I'll have like an iced oat vanilla latte or some shit," and the waiter's looking at him like, "No, we do not have that."
You can order an American coffee, right?
Yeah, you can. It's much more smaller in
Small.
terms of
Yeah.
size.
Yeah.
But as soon as you go beyond, a traditional, I would say, coffee, espresso, or Americano, just you mention ice and coffee together, you just get, crazy, I would say, answers and proposal from any cafe in France. But that's also the beauty of it, kind of. So, but yes, I need to upgrade my level of coffee and coffee expertise as well as the level of caffeine I will ingest on a daily basis. That's for sure.
I, I believe you'll be just fine, Arthur. Don't worry.
Yeah, we believe in you. All right, so let's talk about performance audio. This is an emerging category as the recent round you raised, which we can talk about, Arthur, illustrates. A category with a lot of momentum and investment behind it. What has historically made it so hard to realize this concept of performance audio, and how are you approaching it at Audion?
Yeah, I mean, so audio have been there for a long time now. I think like the podcast format invented by Apple is like 20 or 25 years old now. So it being a journey. But I would say from a marketer's perspective, audio has always been considered as a branding slash awareness channel. Also because there is this kind of radio legacy as well. Plus, especially in the States, podcast is really driven by, host read ads, which is also a different way, to place advertising. So less automated, much more, natively inserted. And so all that combined, we really saw this kind of, duality between there is more and more content available, but it's more and more monetized through branding formats and with this kind of, awareness and branding play. What really changed in the last year or year and a half is really the infrastructure that is behind, digital audio in general. So essentially programmatic, but also more and more AI, really unlocking a lot of capabilities in a very fragmented ecosystem with a lot of, I would say, time spent from a human, perspective in order to make it happen. And all that is just, changing the ecosystem big time. And that's really our play is really to being able to do performance audio. So essentially to make audio more accountable for marketers.
Walk us through how you pitch performance audio to a marketer or a brand. Like, let's say I have $100,000 test budget, deciding on a number of emerging formats. Maybe I'm thinking about, I don't know, ads in ChatGPT. Maybe I'm thinking about performance CTV. Maybe I'm thinking about audio. How do you convince me to give you the budget over other emerging formats?
So I think the starting point is really the scale that now you have on digital audio. So in the US, it's I think 82% of Americans consuming digital audio on a monthly basis, and on average it will be like a 2 hours a day digital audio consumption. More than half of the total audio consumption is now digital, and it's just growing month after month. So audiences are there, so that means your clients or prospects are definitely there. So that's one thing is really reach is there, and so if you are not addressing digital audio part of your media mix, you are in a way kind of missing, a big part of, media habits on a daily basis. The other thing is audio can now be accountable in an activation. So social, CTV, as you mentioned, are more and more accountable. So you can, monitor performance. You can also optimize against it. And we believe that now with audio, you can also do the same because we have credible measurements in place into our system. And therefore, as soon as you can, deliver outcomes and measure those outcomes, it's a completely different narrative and a completely different way of addressing audio. Now you can be part of a much more, I would say, linear digital activation with almost the same ingredients, which is like the right infrastructure, essentially programmatic, more data, better creative, and therefore measurement.
Got it. Talk about, so there's reach and then there's accountability and then sort of like infrastructure. From the reach perspective, where are people spending their time? Like, where is the good pockets of audio inventory?
So today it will be well divided between podcasts. You have radio as well, but the more it goes, the more radio is more like on demand, so therefore it becomes a podcast. And music is also a very big part of digital audio consumption, not only in the US, I would say globally. But the two main, I would say, type of content will be podcast and music, or let's say spoken audio and music. Then you will have the platform behind it.
Right.
So the main audio platforms will be, globally speaking, YouTube number one for either music and podcast. Then Spotify is probably number two on a global perspective. And then you have Apple Podcast, who is podcast only, but with a very big market share, again, globally speaking. And then on a local basis, you will have, here and there local players. So, for example, Pandora in the US only exists in North America. In France, we have Deezer. There is SoundCloud that is here, and so it depends, locally speaking. But once we talk about the formats and the platforms, Then you have, the publishers behind it, the type of content, and especially on podcasts, the long tail of, all the creators, providing content that can be more or less consumed. And all that is an opportunity as soon as you are able to address it the right way.
Is it problematic, Arthur, that you have a few giant publishers who are dominating the inventory, or is it a fairly open ecosystem? Because I think, for example, of like the AI opportunity growing really fast, but people wonder, okay, well, will OpenAI just ultimately centralize all of its ad tech, or will there be an opportunity for third-party players?
Yeah, so I will definitely consider podcast as an open web, kind of inventory, in the sense that it's pretty open. So it's essentially server-side ad insertion. So that means you have really the ability to insert ads dynamically and distribute your ads across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other podcast recipient that can be a podcast application. YouTube is different because YouTube being YouTube, but YouTube is also fairly quite transparent. I mean, you can target across different URLs. You have a lot of metadata you can play with compared to, for example, some CTV application. So all in all, the audio ecosystem is fairly open and quite transparent, which are really two really strong, I would say, assets we have in our space. And therefore, the real, I would say, pain we are seeing in audio is not necessarily the platform or the way you can insert ads. It's really the amount of content behind those platforms, because I mean there is millions of podcasts out there. There is hundreds of thousands of episodes uploaded and distributed daily, and therefore what is a good podcast? Is it brand safe? Is it brand suitable for one specific brand or another? Does it drive performance or not? So that's more like the kind of questions, and I would say the kind of pain we are seeing in the space, much more than the addressability as a standpoint.
Brand suitability, brand safety aside, let's get back to performance. So I want to talk about creative in a second. How do you measure and prove performance from a user or a subset of users, like hearing an ad? Like, walk us through all of the steps and how you do it.
So performance is, because most of the time people consider performance as a click-based channel, more or less, so search,
Exactly.
etc. On audio, you don't have any clicks, or if you have, it's quite marginal, so it depends on the platform and the format. So it's more like a post, I would say, exposure kind of performance. And therefore, the whole point for us is not to say like audio can compete with meta and search in terms of CPA or cost of acquisition. It's more like how do we make audio accountable, and therefore, to answer your question, Eric, it's really how are you able to measure this kind of post audio impression and like this kind of after exposure effect. And so for that, our play is just to rely on third-party measurer, because measurement is a job, especially in Europe with GDPR. So that's also something we have, and we also had to work on. And so the whole point for us was like, okay, let's identify what are the main KPIs or the main outcomes brands and marketers would like to measure. And therefore it's essentially upper funnel, mid and lower funnel. So it can be brand lift survey, it can be online conversion, for footfall traffic, sorry. And so we just identify, partners who have a credible measurement methodology and who can also make some adjustments so that our audio activation can be tracked and measured with their solution. And so today, the way it works is every brand have a certain KPI to address. Then we make some suggestions about who can be the third-party measurer, who can measure the outcomes you would like to trade your campaign against, and it's just plug and play into our solution, and we can optimize all that along the way.
That's interesting. So really the role you play, Arthur, is you're connecting all the dots, right? Like there are so many different KPIs and measurement providers out there, and you have figured out all these different ways to measure the impact of an audio campaign, and you're helping advertisers understand those options and then sort of automating the measurement path to provide a comprehensive assessment.
Exactly. I think it's really a necessity to make things easier, just to make them scale. And I think audio is definitely probably one of the worst channels for that, because of the fragmentation on, the formats, the platforms, the creative, as well as the measurement. So we try to make things easier. And yes, so the measurement part, sorry, is also probably the most critical one, because when we started, a couple of years ago, we didn't have this kind of measurement piece, and so usually when we are able to convert a client, it was more or less a one shot, because if you are not able to go against a certain level of impression, you are just branding. It's a one shot campaign, and for the next wave, they were just going to go on social or CTV where they can drive a certain ROI. And so it was absolutely essential for us to go in that direction where we provide more accountability. Therefore, we are able, to measure the performance. And once you have that in place, which is a very solid foundation, then you can also start building everything related to optimization, just to, be better than the competition on that regard.
Creative used to be a bottleneck, from what I understand, particularly for like digital native brands that are just churning out ads for social and video and so on and so forth. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I imagine that might be one of the things that AI has really unlocked. So back to our hypothetical, tough media buyer trying to figure out where he or she allocates their next incremental experimental dollar. They say, but Arthur, I don't have any creative and I don't have any creative production capabilities. How do you answer that?
Yeah, it's so I would say the two main issues we're seeing with the creatives are one, radio brands who wants to use their radio creative for the digital audio activation, which is probably the worst idea ever, simply because
Why?
you
Why is that?
you yeah, because you are using a 1 2 minute creative. Basically, a radio ad will be in the middle of a 5 minutes funnel, so you need to stand out. There is a lot of repetition. I won't say annoying jingle, but you get my point. And so therefore, you are going to use this creative that is meant really to stand out in a 5 minutes ad funnel in a also very likely noisy environment, because you are essentially driving a car, and use it for a one-to-one approach where 85% of people will use a smartphone and very likely will use a headphone or AirPods. And so you have right away a creative that is not meant for this kind of digital audio consumption and will very likely not provide the best performance. So I think the first thing is, if you are a radio advertiser, just need to have a dedicated digital audio creative. Doesn't mean change the message, but just also change the the look and feel, if you can say so, about your creative, which is something more neutral, much more talkative, and not use a lot of cosmetics around it just to stand out, because you don't have to. It's a one-to-one. You will be the only one in the funnel. You get the full attention of the listener. So that's one element, is really the radio spender, who are actually the first one to convert into digital audio. They were this kind of let's use the MP3 file, which is the radio ads, into digital audio, because technically it's working, but ultimately it's not like the best way to drive performance. And yes, you're right, Eric. On the other hand, probably 85% or 90% of all advertisers into an agency are not audio spender at all, simply because they don't have a creative. So that's one of the bottleneck. And so GenAI helps a lot on that regard. So one, to produce ads at absolutely zero cost. So that's one thing. And two, and I believe that is also extremely interesting, to start engaging this kind of digital brand into something more personalized, because as the production cost became a commodity and it's a one-to-one addressability channel, you also have data that you can use in order to create variables on the flight, and just personalize the creative in order to maximize the performance. So yes, GenAI is helping a lot on that regard. For one, really kill the entry barriers when it comes to building a creative to run a campaign, and secondly, and I believe more importantly, to just try to stretch the personalization in order to drive more performance.
There's got to be a subset of marketers that crush it in something like audio, right? Because there's still such a gap between, to your point, right, like time spent and ad spend. And usually, those don't last, right? Those arbs close over time, but there's a set of marketers that like figure it out in the beginning, and they just, embrace the channel, spend a ton, figure it out. And then everybody follows them. Who are those marketers today, or what are the types of marketers today that are just like, crushing it with audio that people can learn from?
So, I mean, in the US, you will have the usual suspect. So I know like brands like BetterHelp have been, massively investing into the
Oh,
space.
geez, yeah. Yeah.
I believe it also makes sense based on the product or the service they want to sell and promote. But there is also a lot of DNVB brands who have been extremely active into the space as well. Also because with coupon and the fact that it can deliver a lot of attention if you have the right promotion code, maybe it's also a great way to activate extra transaction. So all those guys have been really in the early days of, let's say, podcast performance, and now it's almost like a legacy medium they are investing. In Europe, it's slightly different. I would probably say that radio spender are definitely the biggest spender into digital audio in general, simply because they can tap almost the same content but with different audiences, and so it's a really nice complementarity to what they're doing in radio, and the ability to reach younger audiences and also to track more performance along the way. But the more it goes, the more we are seeing also digital native brands, penetrating the space, because there is still a huge untapped opportunity when it comes to the audiences, the ad pressure, and therefore the ability for any brand to stand out. Also for digital brands, what is really interesting is the fact that you can take the time to explain a product that can be a little bit more complicated, or just to explain a product that people don't know as a brand, because if you just create a product or brand, you need to take the time to explain. So visual can help, but podcast as well, and so that's the kind of brand really making it happen right now.
Joe, why did you smile when Arthur said BetterHelp? Were you about to say a joke about me
Oh
needing therapy?
no. That's a great call. We'll have to ask your family about that one. I think that I smiled actually because I have heard that ad so many times, right? And that shows the power of the audio category, is that there are like 10 to 20 D2C type brands that we have all just heard like thousands of ad reads from our different like favorite podcast hosts, and that shows what is unique about the medium, I think.
Yep. And that's a sign of the type of marketer that I would suspect is just printing, just figuring this out, whether it's just like sheerly low cost inventory and they're finding it first, or there's something about the message, to your point, Arthur, like it's easier maybe to articulate and have a trusted source articulate the offering, or they've just like figured out performance. I'm fascinated with cases like this.
Yeah, 100%.
I think also there's probably a generational component. I'm not entirely sure, but I think those kinds of brands, like BetterHelp, right? Like millennials made therapy, like we destigmatized therapy for Eric, so that he and his generation could go sit on the couch. So, you guys had The Sopranos, but it was still a little touch and go then, all right? Now all men are in therapy. It's fine.
It was taboo. Yeah, he had to, show up and close the door.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about
fundraising.
Yeah. So Arthur, you just raised $15 million. Series B announced
congrats.
A little over a month ago. Yeah, congrats. Why did Eric turn you down? And how was the fundraising process? Because we have a lot of startup founders who listen to this pod, so I'm sure they'd love your experience and advice.
For the record, we're just meeting for the first time. I didn't get a look, Arthur. So what's up with that?
Why didn't you give Eric a look? Eric didn't even get the email. Usually he's on the short list.
So also it's part of the process we handle, which was like, because we are European based, so you already understood with my terrible French accent, but now the company is operating across almost 10 European markets, and of course the timing is the right one to go into the US for obvious reasons, and so in order to make it we needed to raise money, and so to get to your point, Joe, so we had this kind of dilemma, which is like, do we go for a roadshow with US investors, which will take more time, or can we do it with European investors who probably have, not as deep pocket as the US investors, but also we have the connection right now, and so we can probably make it faster. So that was our call, which is the reason why we are not able to engage with Eric, but never say never. But for this specific process, we were able to raise with European investors very quickly, with, I would say, the terms we wanted, which was also good for us in terms of timing. when it comes to the fundraising in general, I would say that there is money on the market, that's for sure. The world change, that's also very true. And now you also need to be, I would say, a credible candidate if you want to raise a certain amount of money, especially as soon as you hit, Series A, Series B, at least in Europe. And so before it was just, growth or potentially just the tech piece that was important. Now you also need to have in front of that some strong financial KPIs who justify an investment. And also, regarding us in the audio space, it's not just we are going to build, an audio ad tech company. It's really what's the play behind, just the medium that is audio that is very likely underinvested. But what's your actual play across the format? And performance audio with obviously more AI, to make it happen is something that resonated with the investors. So no, all in all, we were pleased, to raise relatively shortly for the European standards, I would say, and also because we wanted, to go fast in order to expand rapidly in the US.
That's super impressive. I hear that it's challenging in Europe just because of the proportionally less number of funds than in the US. What was the fundraising climate and process like? And obviously, you don't need to get into details. Just more out of curiosity because we do have, frankly, European founders that listen to this as well.
No, so actually, so we had our board on like September, October with our investors. We were like, okay, what do we do next year? And probably in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks, we just all agreed that the right play was just to raise an extra round and go quick in the US. And after this, I would say a call, it took us roughly a month and a half to get all the terms done, and then you get like all the paperwork and stuff. But all in all,
That's
in a matter
good.
of months, we are able, to raise the money, which is good again with European standards, and also without having to go like with a formal roadshow, which is probably I would say the hardest part as a founder is really to get the data room ready, prepare the deck, reach out to investors, do 1, 2, 3 meetings. I mean, that is really the hardest part on the fundraising, which we were able to avoid because one, we had a track record and we had, I would say, some credible, metrics to provide to investors. And two, most of the money we raised was with actual investors of ours. So that was also,
Yeah.
a good way for us to not go into that roadshow and just, take the European money from VCs and just, export that in a way to the US market.
Let's get into the use of proceeds and U.S. expansion in a second. Um, there's the creative piece around AI, which seems to be a no-brainer. How else are you using AI to build the business, run the business, do things differently?
So we started to use AI, I would say 18, 24 months ago. And back in the days, it was really like as soon as we identified a task in the value chain that was just too time consuming or basically like almost impossible to do by a human, we tried to optimize that task by just using AI or just completely replace it by AI. So it started back in the days with targeting function. So audio was mainly media planning oriented. So basically you had a brief. I want to target, men. So you are going to use like very subjective ways. Like I want to target sports content because men likes to listen to sports content. Now with AI, you can do contextual targeting at scale, almost in real time. And so that was like one big piece, which is like, let's move from traditional media planning and just address podcast per podcast into something much more like contextual AI based. So that was the first piece. And then we had, of course, the creative part, everything related to the trading, etc. So basically it was like a suite of agents kind of, which is now are more and more interconnected, one with each other. I won't say that we have this kind of end-to-end full agenting suite because that doesn't really exist right now, but probably that's the objective midterm. And so right now AI really help us to enhance everything we do from just answering a brief from a client, to make a proposal when it comes to the creative, just creating a mock-ups. 2 years ago, we had to go to the studio, we had to book a voiceover, a comedian who had to build a script, etc. Now you can do it with Gen AI in just a couple of clicks. In 30 seconds, you have something you can, present to the client. So that really changed the perspective of the way you are just address, your sales motion cycle. And then, of course, everything related to outcomes, which is much more like algorithm than AI, if I can say so, but all that will also be interconnected with more like the AI suite we are building. So that's the way we are approaching AI, is really at core and really in front of operational task, how it can really make a better job than human. Sometimes, human do a better job than AI, depending on the task, and so we rely on human. But the more it goes, the more we are able to optimize everything we do in order to make it easier or more efficient or both.
So, Arthur, it sounds like AI played a role in the fundraising process, obviously, in that it helps explain the why now, right? Which is always important, and why the opportunity is growing. I'm curious, is there anything you did in past fundraising rounds that you did not do this time, or anything you've sort of learned across, seed A, B, that made you a better fundraiser as a founder?
I believe that because it's like our third fundraising, you just need to be prepared and also to be strong, on your pitch. And so those two things are really important, because if you have your data room ready, if you know exactly what are, the information an investor are going to ask you, and 99% of the time they always ask, for the same information and the same data, you are going to win so much time compared to just, go in the process and along the way build your data room. So that is probably the worst way to handle a fundraising process. So be ready on your data room, and also be strong on your narrative. And when I say be strong on the narrative, it's like, what did you deliver so far? So that's one thing. And what's your vision for tomorrow? And it's really the combination of both that really is going to be appealing, at least today, at least for European investors, because now metrics matters when it comes to, the financial KPIs. And especially for a company like ours, with now, we are 7 years old. So that's a legacy. You need to demonstrate that the money you raised before, was well used. The fact that we are a profitable company helped a lot, I have to say as well. And of course, growth is important, but now you also need to have a sustainable approach when it comes to how are you going to use the fund, and also the vision behind all that. So yeah, preparation and narrative are really the two big things that I believe needs to be extremely well addressed by any founders who want to raise money.
So you raised the money, you're moving to New York. Tell us in a bit more detail about what you're using the money for, and sort of what it looks like to enter the US market, having already built a strong business in Europe.
Yeah. So half of the money will go for my New York City apartment because of the real estate price.
We know that. That's the truth.
But no. So I will. So most of the money will go in the US anyway, because we want to make it happen soon enough, and it's a pay-to-play market kind of, and so there is a cost of investment that needs to be addressed.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by pay to play?
Just if you want to hire the best salespeople, there is a cost.
I got you. Yeah. So it's about sales. Yep.
Yeah, marketing is also a big part of the plan, and so of course, marketing is a lot of investment. And from working with a great marketing agency to being present on the top events that you can have on the ad tech space, all that costs money. But you need to invest if you want to make it happen, and you want to make it fast. So that's a big part of the investment will go into the US across people, marketing, and other topics related to that. There's also a big portion of that will go into the product and R&D team, obviously. AI really changed the perspective of what we do, our product, but also the way we are building product. And so all that needs to be, of course, addressed. And we believe right now we have this kind of edge because we do performance audio with AI. There is not that much company doing it, and we would like to continue to have this edge. And so for that, we need to continue to invest. And we are also very likely going to keep a little bit of money to be tactical in European markets or other regions we are not currently addressing through minor M&A that we did like a couple of years ago in some other European markets. So this kind of tactical build-up strategy is something we can consider as well, or just opening a new market or a new region where we believe it makes sense. Of course, it won't be the same level of investment we'll have in the US, but in order to expand our business, which is very likely scalable because you can podcast and music everywhere, that's also something we can consider.
Super cool. I feel like the market is ripe for audio. Joe and I have been paying more attention to it more recently. It's one of those things that seems to be, kind of uniquely AI resistant, right? Like maybe AI is going to lead to a boom and more things for people to listen, which could create more ad inventory. But, to the extent that things like podcasts and your favorite artists don't go away or grow, there's like, I think a very nice, AI resistant lens there. Joe, did you have more questions on US or can I keep going?
No, keep going.
So Arthur, what do you listen to? You're an audio guy. What's on the playlist?
So I'm listening to a lot of music. I'm actually a DJ, so house music, techno music is part of.
Oh my God, he's gonna fit in so well in Brooklyn. He's an
Interns,
entrepreneur French DJ.
Stop here, interns. Clip this. Go ahead. Talk about your DJ.
Let me tell you, he's not the first. All right. The ladies are just lucky he's off the market because the ladies of Brooklyn don't need another DJ. I'm sorry to tell you, Arthur. They've had enough. Leave them alone.
Yeah, so I know it's like not particularly special to be a French guy listening to house music, but well that's who I am basically. But
we've heard of Daft Punk. Okay, they're good. Whatever. We know you have a lot more where that came from.
We have a good legacy, house or let's say electronic, musicians in Paris, which I believe helped a lot, for us to discover that kind of music. And so, music, I listen to that music a lot. The more it goes, because obviously as a French, I'm listening to French podcasts, but the more it goes, I'm also listening to American podcasts, which is really interesting is because the US market is much more mature in terms of, content proposal per vertical. And so let's say you want really to listen to, let's say, ad tech podcast, to give, an example. You now have, let's say, between 5 to 10 relevant ad tech podcasts that are, happening in the US. You probably have one or two in France.
Two.
No, you have two ad tech podcasts.
Two great ad tech podcasts in the US.
I'm kidding. Go on.
And so I really like the depth of in one specific category. In the US you'll have much more options than what you can have elsewhere. And so obviously right now it's about ad tech podcast. I also listen to more and more let's say founder podcasts, also about fundraising. When we're in the process, I was trying to listen to a lot of people who went to fundraising, etc. Because also podcasts help you to learn more, and it's extremely convenient in that regard. But basically listening to music, electronic music, and podcasts that help me be smarter at the end of the day.
Awesome, man. Could I hit you with some rapid fire ones before we close?
Sure.
All right. Joe, you have no idea what I'm doing here.
No, I don't. I'm experiencing this live. I'm on the edge.
We're trying to make the podcast both educational and fun.
Eric got a homework assignment. Be more fun.
All right, you ready, Arthur?
Yeah, go on.
BetterHelp or AG1?
AG1.
Wired earbuds or AirPods?
Oh, see, that's the DJ in him. That's the DJ in him.
No.
Because everyone knows the answer is AirPods, but he's a little hipster, all right? His music people are listening.
No, I have to say, so two things. AirPods did so much for the audio ecosystem in general. I had to say AirPod. But if the Apple product team is listening, just place a decent microphone into the AirPods. I mean, people just, I mean, they can't handle it anymore.
Absolutely. Jay-Z or Drake?
Um, I'll probably go for Jay-Z.
My man. Joe Rogan or open market?
Open market.
All
I know
right.
Arthur's into the aliens. I know Arthur's listening to Joe Rogan. He watches those clips on YouTube. He's like, when are they coming? I know they're here. The US government's hiding it from us. Let's,
Yeah,
let's
I'm still
disclose.
waiting for the White House announcement about the aliens. So yeah, we'll see.
Arthur, you're a man of impeccable taste. You're welcome back on open market anytime. We appreciate you, man. Joe, anything else
Thank
before
you.
we wrap?
No, beautiful job. Thank you very much, Arthur. Ok, on peut se moquer de l'accent d'Eric comme vous voulez, hein?
Thank you very much, and good accent, Joe. And next time we'll do it in French or Italian. Up to you guys.
Okay, well, we'll work on it in
Guys,
the meantime.
next time
Eric's scared.
we'll have a venti coffee for you, see what kind of effect it has on your system. All right, we'll see you next week, everybody.
All right, bye, guys.
Bye bye. Thank you.